Okay, so it is now 3:31. I'm not going to rush to get started since I know Natalie is just about to sign in. But just wanted to let everybody who's attending know that this is the kind of Global Accessibility Awareness Day kickoff for the WordPress Accessibility Day that we'll be hosting on October 2nd in 2020, this very year. This is the first time that the WordPress Accessibility team has tried to put on some kind of big event, something where we're doing a whole event dedicated 100% to the intersection between WordPress and accessibility. So it's a new thing for us. It's exciting. It's a whole new way of trying to share the word about accessibility with the greater WordPress community. The event is going to be a full 24 hours long. It'll start at 1800 UTC, which I believe is 1:00 p.m. my time, which is Central Time, United States. And we'll run through the night, through the next day, giving 24 separate talks looking at that intersection between WordPress and accessibility. This is, of course, a huge circle of possible topics. And what we don't want to do too much is bias the ideas of what exactly WordPress and accessibility means. Now that the entire panel is here, I'm just going to turn over for a moment. I'm going to let us all introduce ourselves. First of all, I'm Joe Dawson. I'm kind of leading the WordPress Accessibility Day group team to try and get this thing moving and make this happen. I'm also a member of the WordPress Accessibility team and a plugin developer. I've been involved in WordPress and specifically in accessibility with WordPress since 2012. And I've been doing work with WordPress since 2008. I started with accessibility in 2004. So I've been involved in this whole big process for a long time. I'll now turn it over to Natalie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Oh, sure. Hello, I am Natalie MacLeese. I'm a founder of an agency that focuses on accessibility called Digitally. I've been doing work with web accessibility for about 20 years. I've been involved with the WordPress accessibility team for a little over a year, I think, but involved with the WordPress community pretty extensively since, well, I attended my first WordCamp in 2007, probably. And I've been working with WordPress since then. I'm really excited about Accessibility Day.
Thanks so much, Natalie. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Enrique.
Yeah, I'll go next. Hello, everyone. My name is Enrique Sanchez. I'm also a member of the accessibility team. I think I joined around the same time as you, Natalie. So about a year ago, I started to volunteer with the team. And I'm also a fairly new person in the world of WordPress. I have been working on the web for 15, 18 years. But I'm pretty new to the world of WordPress. So I'm pretty excited about this event and the scope that we have. Again, being a new member to the community is just great to see how great it is. It's a great place to be, a great place to learn, to share. So working on an event like this, it's just even more exciting. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Enrique. It's really great to have both of you here and to have both of you participating as new members of the WordPress accessibility team and doing so much to contribute. I just really appreciate that. I want to say thank you right now to everything you've been doing. As a side note, I should have mentioned this right at the very beginning, but in case you hadn't already noticed this and been aware of it, we do have captions running live for this event. And you can turn those on by enabling captions in your device. It's very difficult for me to say exactly how you do that because, as many of you probably know by this point, Zoom puts their controls in different locations on every device. It's a nice platform. It has a lot of advantages, but consistency is not necessarily one of them. At any rate, I wanted you to know that that was available and that you can find it and turn it on. I hope that's useful for all of you. We'll certainly be taking advantage of them as we publish this, since I am recording this event as well. So back to the topic of WordPress Accessibility Day. With 24 hours of talks, obviously that won't be nonstop. We don't expect everybody to talk for an hour straight and then segue immediately into the next one. But 24 talks is a lot of information. So we have a lot of possible topics to cover. We know that we want to have talks that talk about the accessibility of WordPress themes, that talk about how we can make WordPress plugins better, how we can make the editor experience better. Those are all kind of big, broad topics that are well established and very well known. But we also want to be able to look at issues such as, where are knowledge gaps for users of WordPress? What are the things that people who are building a WordPress website for themselves as home users don't know or need to know to be able to make their websites more accessible? So we're hoping to get a lot of great submissions from speakers who have ideas about things that you want to know. It's going to be a lot. And maybe some of these talks will be very short, and maybe we'll do a group of 2 or 3 talks all batched into a single hour. If they're related, if they are compact, we want to be very flexible. So one of the reasons for having this particular event today is we want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. We want to know what the burning issues for you are in terms of what you need to know about WordPress and accessibility. This isn't necessarily the day where we're going to answer in completeness everybody's questions. I do have a set of questions that have been sent to me in advance, and I'm certainly happy to take a stab at them. But those are ultimately the questions that are going to be the big ones that the whole event is about in October. For the moment, I'd like to turn it over really quickly to Enrique to just give some thoughts about what he would really like to see come out of the WordPress Accessibility Day.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Joe. Like I was saying on my intro, the thing I'm most excited about this is the community and the chance for us to learn together. So knowing how big the WordPress ecosystem is, knowing how far-reaching it is, I'm just really excited to see that we can all come together under one umbrella, the umbrella of accessibility, and learn and just keep learning. Like just make sure that this does not stop with just this one day. Make sure that we continue to have these discussions and these conversations and just move the WordPress project forward in terms of accessibility.
That sounds like a great goal for me. What do you have to think about that, Natalie? You're muted.
Sorry. There we go. I think that there are developers who are involved in WordPress who are overwhelmed by the idea of accessibility and not really sure how to get started or how to incorporate that into sites or plugins or themes that they're building. So I'm hoping that we can get some information for them on where they could get started and make that a less intimidating topic. And I'm also hoping that we can help people who are building websites who are, not technical, just business owners or bloggers or whatever they happen to be doing, to get them some information so that they understand some things they need to keep in mind while they're putting a site together to make sure that anybody who comes along will be able to use it.
That's certainly fabulous as well. I think the challenge for site owners is really difficult to bear. And that's one of those areas where working on WordPress core and the WordPress core software, it's difficult to have an impact there because we work really very, very hard at making the admin the administrative interface accessible, but that doesn't necessarily have an impact on the resulting website. As much as the content editor can be accessible and the default theme can be accessible and all of those tools, there are enormous challenges that come up as soon as somebody starts installing third-party software, such as plugins, such as themes, whether premium or not. And that's a hard thing for us as WordPress core developers in the core team to figure out how to solve. And that's definitely an education aspect of doing something like WordPress Accessibility Day that I'd love to see really have an impact, is to be able to show site owners, maybe find ways to identify the status and accessibility of themes and plugins, and hopefully for theme and plugin developers to have some better idea about what they need to do to make their products better. I'd love to see WordPress as an organization do more to promote accessibility in plugins and themes, to really make those a top class of promoted item within the ecosystem. Obviously, we have these directories filled with services. Some of them are accessible, some of them are not. And there's no real differentiation within our ecosystem on whether or not they're accessible as something that's important in classifying them as a good resource. And obviously, with some plugins, that's not even relevant. Not all plugins even have an interface. They manipulate your data in some way that is outside of what accessibility is concerned with. But I'd love to see things like that change. We do have a question that just came in from the Q&A. And the question is from Joel Crawford Smith. We use a WordPress network. All the default WordPress themes are available. Everything from 2012 and newer are pretty accessible, but 2010 and 2011 have navigation issues. Can fixing the navigation of those two old themes be part of the future roadmap? That is a good question. And it is interesting to hear from a large network who is still using those older core themes. I know that one of the challenges with maintaining some of those older core themes is that, frankly, it's a lot to maintain. With the existing update status, the way we're handling updates, every version of WordPress for dozens of versions back is being maintained for security updates. So anytime there's a security update, that frequently is backported to 20 different releases. That's also true for themes. We do as much as we can to keep themes getting updated. But themes always come into one really difficult question when you're looking at updating them. And that's that you frequently have to change the core HTML or core CSS of that theme, which is in fact the front end of somebody's website. And that can lead to some breaking issues. When it comes to accessibility, a lot of the time, we have been leaning more and more towards overriding Note and actually making those changes. But when you're starting to talk about the themes that are 9 and 10 years old, one of the convenient things about the 2010, 2011 naming convention is you know pretty much exactly how old a theme is that we don't really have a great sense for how much they're being used and whether those changes will actually have a big impact. So I think it's something to definitely think about on the roadmap. I have this idea, I don't remember for certain, that those two themes have actually officially been deprecated, but I wouldn't want you to quote me on that. I don't really remember for certain. It's not something that's come up recently. But it's great to know that this is something that people are concerned about. Another question that came in prior to this event from, just a second, from Kelly Pierce had 2 questions. And these are really broad questions. These are big. These could definitely be a whole talk on their own. One of them is, how is WordPress accessible to bloggers and website creators, not just those with disabilities who access a WordPress website or blog? That question is a little bit hard to parse. I think the question means about the ability of people to actually use WordPress from the administrative side, as opposed to people's ability to visit the website. And overall, it's my opinion that assuming this is an average WordPress website that's not using a default theme and hasn't specifically taken steps towards accessibility, then the admin experience is better than the front-end experience. And that's because, as I talked earlier, we working on WordPress core can have a huge impact on the back end that it's very difficult for us to have on the front end. Would you agree with that, Enrique and Natalie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm dominating this conversation, so I'm trying
No.
to. But so I'm just going to pass the next question directly off to whoever raises their hand first. Oh, really? Uh-huh. So neither of you want to answer this question. And is it just because I haven't
know the question first?
Right, let's just hear the question first.
All right, so I'll give you the question. Fair enough. The question is, where can someone find information about which themes and plugins are most compatible with screen readers? All right, Natalie's got it.
So for your themes, if you're looking at the themes in the WordPress.org theme repository, there is a tag on those called Accessibility Ready. It right now, unfortunately, filters those down to just over 100 choices, but there are some excellent choices in there that are very flexible, very nicely put together. Plugins are more challenging because we don't have the equivalent of an Accessibility Ready tag for plugins. So your best bet that I have found so far is to read through the documentation carefully. There are plugins that explicitly mention that they have taken steps to be accessible. So that's always a good sign. And if you can't find the information, you can always reach out to the plugin developer to ask them. And I'm also really proactive about reaching out to plugin and theme developers and alerting them to accessibility issues in their plugins and themes. And I think a 50-50 success rate in getting them to fix those relatively quickly.
Thank you, Natalie. That's pretty much what I would probably have said. In fact, the reason I got into building WordPress plugins in the first place in 2008 was because I needed to be able to produce particular features on a website, and I couldn't find an accessible version of a plugin to do that. And the WordPress community was much wilder and woollier in 2008, and you know, some people would respond and you'd get something fixed, and some people you'd feel like you were just writing into thin air and nothing would happen. And honestly, I feel like that's probably somewhat still the case. Today, I'll be honest, I tend to only choose plugins where I already have some familiarity with the author, or just because that way I know that I have a good chance of managing to reach out to them and maybe getting some feedback and getting some changes made. I certainly don't just go off and build new plugins every week anymore, because that's a lot of work.
It's too much work.
At one point, I was maintaining 17 plugins. And I've trimmed that back now because I also have to do work. So that's a challenge. I mean, getting plugins to be recognized as accessible, finding out whether they're accessible, getting problems fixed if they're not accessible, knowing whether or not a plugin is accessible. all of these are problems we'd love to have talks to address specifically. Another question I can jump to, and this question is from Sandy Feldman. And the question is it possible for blind users to access the WordPress backend if it's set up as a Gutenberg site? I'm going to just pass this over to Enrique.
Can you repeat the question, please?
I can.
Gutenberg.
I did actually email this to you, Just wanted to mention that.
It's one of them? Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is. But I'll repeat the question. My question is it possible for blind users to access the WordPress backend if it's set up as a Gutenberg site?
Oh, right. Yeah, the answer is yes. The Gutenberg editor, it's improving every day. I know this because I contribute every day on it. And in the last year, it has seen a lot of improvements in terms of screen reader accessibility and keyboard as well. So it is accessible. It is by no means perfect, and there's still a lot of work to do. But the whole team behind it is actively working on making it better every day.
And I'll also extend that answer a little bit to say that two things. First, and this might just be something I'm reading into the question that isn't there, is I felt that there's some implication that using Gutenberg has a broad impact on the WordPress backend outside of the process of actually editing and creating content. And it doesn't. Gutenberg, at least at this time, only impacts the process of creating and editing content. So in terms of logging in, navigating, exploring, finding content, it has no impact at all. It's only used in that one area. Now, that does also mean that there are some challenges in there because essentially the process of using Gutenberg is a completely different user experience than using any other part of WordPress. So that can pose some learning challenges. But from a gross idea of, is it accessible? I think while I wouldn't 100% say, yes, it is 100% absolutely everything is accessible, there are absolutely some flaws, and they're still being worked on, still being found. I'm sure there are things that haven't even come up yet that we just don't know about. But it's a work in progress, and it's really made an enormous amount of progress in the last year and a half since it was released. I still think it was released way too soon. But I will honestly say that I feel had it been released in the last major WordPress release, which is, I think, I can't believe I've lost track. 5.4 was just released, right? Or is that what we're working on? Yeah, 5.4 was just released.
Yep.
Now that I've been involved in releases since 3.4, it gets really confusing. So many numbers. At any rate, the version that was released in 5.4, I would say, would have been a great release. It would have been really exciting as an initial launch of Gutenberg, and in good condition. So it is what it is, but it's making a lot of progress. I can see there's a follow-up here, deciding whether or not to set up a new site for an author, a content author who is blind. And I would say that that's really going to be an end user choice. If there's going to be a question of how comfortable this author is with learning new ways of working with websites and exploring, Gutenberg has a lot of useful tools and power that you can implement, but it can be a lot to learn. It's a complicated application, and there's a lot to it. So I feel that's a conversation with the user. We have another question that has come in through the Q&A, which I'll happily address myself because I've done a lot on this topic. The question is from Cassandra Marshall, and it is, what is your opinion on alt tag and aria tag writing plugins? First of all, I'm not sure exactly what it means to be an aria tag writing plugin, though I know there are a lot of kind of toolbar-esque plugins that implement a lot of kind of ways of marking things up using aria on a website, and they can have very mixed results. The way I would want to answer this is, first of all, when we're talking about alt attributes and a plugin that actually writes alt attributes, I think that is maybe a tiny, tiny step up from garbage. And the reason for that is, while these plugins that are parsing your image and figuring out what's in it, Facebook does this. They have a tool that will automatically analyze your image, and it'll say something like, image may contain block, spoon, red bucket, flower. And as a person trying to absorb what this image is about, I fail to see how that's helpful. I mean, unless it's literally a picture of a still life that contains those 4 items, it doesn't describe the image. It doesn't replace the image. It doesn't give you an idea of what the context of this image is or how it's being used. So I feel pretty strongly that the only good way to get alt text is to write it. So look at the image, look at how you're using the image, and write custom text that meets that purpose. There's a current active ticket in WordPress core to explore rewriting the way WordPress handles alternative text. Right now, you assign alternative text to one image, and that stays with the image. And anytime you use that image, that text is put in. That's fine for images you only ever use once, though arguably there's no particular value to storing that text if you're only using the image once. The problem that it comes into is that it tends to bias towards using the same text every time you use an image. And images are actually used in very radically different ways. An image that's your featured image for a post exists in one way when it's used on your home page, where it's linking to the full article. And it's used in a completely different way in the article itself, where it's some kind of a large leader image that's used to set tone or maybe convey information. In the first case, where it's a link, what it really needs to be talking about is what that link is going to do. The image itself is not important in this particular scenario. In the blog post, it's critical. So what I'm getting down to here, I think I've gotten a little bit into the weeds, is that anything that's automatically providing an alt attribute for you is probably not doing you a service. And the same is usually going to be true about anything that's trying to automatically generate accessibility solutions for your site. There are some things that can be done. If you're working with known content, my own plugin, WP Accessibility, can, to a limited degree, automatically label standard WordPress form fields. And that's just because those fields are just the comment fields in the search box. They have predetermined names in the WordPress ecosystem, so they're easy to find, and it's easy to identify whether or not they have a label. But that's all it can do. Like some abstract other form, there's really no way to know, because you can't tell what the form is, what it's supposed to do. So there are a lot of WordPress plugins that are accessibility toolbars that make huge claims that they will make your website WCAG compliant or that they'll make it ADA compliant. And those are all junk. You should not use any of those, really. I'm actually willing to be absolutist on that, which I'm usually a little hesitant about. So I'm going to jump over to another question, which is also from Cassandra Marshall, which she sent in advance, which is a more elaborate question about ARIA. And I'm going to hope that Enrique or Natalie will be happy to take this. The question is, there was some discussion a few years back regarding ARIA. I know non-existent is better than incorrect. Which items are essential to ARIA tags? So I think the overall meaning of this question is essentially, where do you really need to use ARIA, and where should it be avoided?
I can speak to that a little bit if you like. So you only need to use ARIA if you are adding some kind of interactivity to the site that isn't covered by native components or like native HTML elements. So if you have just a very straightforward site with text and some images that have alternative descriptions and form with labels, you don't need ARIA for anything on there. If you have an interactive navigation bar that you hover or click to open a sub-navigation, that's an area where ARIA would be helpful in describing to a screen reader if the sub-navigation is open or not. If you have more complex interactions, tabs, sliders, things like that, you'll find that ARIA is really helpful. It is actually really helpful for marking in navigation the current page, but WordPress does that for you automatically. So it'll identify which item in the navigation is the current page. Let's see, trying to think. Is there anything else? Is there anything I'm missing, Enrique or Joe?
So we have a follow-up question from Sandy Feldman. And that question is, what about ARIA regions, and are those useful? So if you wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, if you have a header element for your header and a footer element for your footer and a main element for your main content and an aside element for your sidebar, you technically don't need to add ARIA attributes to those, and a nav for your navigation. If you have multiple navigations on the page, you want to make sure you label them, or that your theme has labeled them, so that somebody can tell the main navigation from, you know, some sort of side or contextual navigation on the page. But that's not technically ARIA. That would just be making sure those things are correct. I see a lot of themes sometimes use both like a header element, but then also put the ARIA role banner on it, which is fine. It's just redundant. It's not hurting anything. It's just making sure that kind of catches the cases where a screen reader has support for one or the other, but not both. If somebody's using that. So it can be helpful to kind of reinforce those for screen readers that don't necessarily support those, like I say, newer HTML elements, but I think they've been around for at least a decade.
HTML5 was officially the primary HTML, I think, since 2014 now. Because I remember when it was announced, I think it was in 2009, and I was like, oh my God, 5 years. Seems a totally different perspective now.
I know, it seems like it happened so fast.
Exactly.
And it's been around forever.
Right. So yeah, in the ARIA regions are kind of interesting because there was this whole transitional period in which what we had was ARIA attributes to define a region. Things like role equals banner and that sort of thing. And that was all transitional because the HTML5 elements were not sufficiently supported by accessibility APIs and screen readers, because there's this kind of three-part transition that has to happen for screen readers to know what's going on a web page. Is that the web page has to have a particular bit of HTML that the browser then interprets into a document object model and then communicates to the operating system's accessibility API, which then the screen reader actually gets that information from the API. So every piece of that has to know what the header is in terms of being a region for the screen reader to actually be able to make use of that. So there was this transitional period where you marked things up as role because HTML5 wasn't well known enough yet. But that's pretty much gone now. Really, if you're using those elements, you're set. So we have a really interesting follow-up question, which is not something I'd even thought about or really considered. And the question is, would the WordPress Accessibility Marathon have its contributor hours? And if so, what could we do to help? Thank you. And thank you from anonymous attendee. That's, right from the beginning, we talked a lot about the idea of having kind of corresponding in-person local events that would be simultaneous with our event. Obviously, the emerging pandemic has kind of radically changed our thoughts about the idea of live events. And we have no idea whether any of that will be plausible, but don't expect it to be. However, something like a contributor set of hours or day, something that can run parallel without requiring direct in-person interaction sounds interesting. What do you think, Enrique?
I think it does. Like I honestly didn't think about that, but it makes a lot of sense. And please know that the doors are always open. You can always join the Make WordPress Slack instance where most of the work happens, and you can help any day, anytime. You don't need to wait for a big event like this. And if also you're interested, there's also events like WordCamps that host contributor days. Next biggest one is WordCamp Europe. And I believe it's June 4th. That's when they're gonna have a contributor day. So some of us, some of the members of the accessibility team will be around to help folks who want to start contributing or have contributed before in other areas and wanna start helping on the accessibility team. But yeah, the doors are always open. So definitely something we can think about for our event, but please do not wait till then if you are eager to jump in and help.
Yeah, I mean, contributor days can be challenging just because it always takes some degree of interaction to help guide people and give people ideas about what to do. But if we can figure out something that would be kind of structured parallel to this event, something like, depending on what the talk topics are, maybe try and encourage speakers to come away with some contributor takeaways that maybe they could explore in the hour following their talk or in the 20 minutes in between, or I don't know. There are a lot of ideas, but thanks very much for that question, because it's certainly in our last organizational meeting, which was yesterday. We meet on Wednesdays at 18:30 UTC. Is that right? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was 16:30, no? Oh no, I think you're right, 18:30.
We all just translate these numbers to our own local time anyway, and
it is actually 16:30 UTC.
It is. All right.
Yeah.
So we meet every Wednesday at 16:30 UTC in the WordPress Slack channel, Accessibility Events. And in our last meeting, which was yesterday, one of the big topics was what are we going to do about this idea of live events? Are we going to drop it, come up with new ideas? And now we have a new idea. So that makes this whole particular panel incredibly valuable. So thank you. If anybody has any additional questions, I've gone through everything that we had to kick off. Anything they want to know about the event, about WordPress accessibility, we're open. The Q&A is there. And we have one. That's wonderful. Another anonymous attendee, well, it could be the same one. I have no way of knowing. They're anonymous. One barrier that we encountered is from PDF files readability hosted in WordPress sites within plugins like PDF Embedder. Using screen readers like NVDA, the reader keeps reading the controls, but not the tagged content from the accessible PDF. That, ooh, boy, I mean, there are a lot of places that could be happening. I think Natalie—
I actually know where that's happening. I just worked with this plugin recently. So that plugin in particular, PDF Embedder, does something very interesting where it takes the PDF and renders it as a canvas.
Oh.
Inside a box. So there is nothing there to be read by a screen reader or anyone who's looking for plain text. The PDF is completely gone. If you have an accessible PDF that you want, you would need to provide it for download like right before or right after where you embedded it, because once PDF Embedder renders that to a canvas element, any information in that PDF is gone essentially.
Well, it's super convenient that Natalie knew that, because I was just imagining all of the possible ways something could be going wrong there. And there are a lot. File rendering is definitely one of those areas in general, which has a lot of problems. And they're technological problems. I mean, this isn't like something where there's an obvious right way that this plugin should be doing it. It's more, this is a really difficult thing to do. But yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, I was surprised too. I was like, how does this work? When I dug into it, I was like, oh.
Yeah, it can be, I mean, that kind of exposes one of the reasons that figuring out a way to systematically have accessible plugin information is so difficult. It's because compared to themes, plugins are really hard to get a conceptual grasp of. Every plugin is different. Even if you're looking at 3 plugins that do exactly the same fundamental thing, say 3 different plugins that are embedding a PDF, they might work in 3 radically and completely different ways. And so the labor that goes into trying to figure out just what is this plugin doing, let alone whether it's doing it in a way that's accessible, creates these huge problems. And that has been one of the biggest barriers to trying to implement any kind of system to claim or identify plugins that are accessible. It's incredibly labor intensive.
And it's not black or white, because it can be how you use the plugin. So if you have the settings one way, it might be accessible, but if you change some settings, it might no longer be accessible, but it's the exact same plugin.
Absolutely. Which is also one of the problems that comes into things like using the accessibility ready themes. A lot of those themes have, for example, color settings. And though the default options may be accessible, if you set a primary accent color to yellow, suddenly you've got yellow over white and it's not accessible anymore. But the theme has a very difficult time controlling that. So it's kind of challenging. Another follow-up question. This is great. Does there exist or are there any thoughts about creating a WordPress accessibility training package? For example, for people who present in WordPress meetup groups to have a nice starting point. P.S. I'm considering doing this myself once I figure this all out for myself. From Peter Ingersoll. And just full disclosure, I'm completely guessing on people's name pronunciations, so, you know, it's all my fault. I'll take that. I think it's something that comes up periodically. I know I had a conversation with the WordPress training team at one point. But it's been difficult to get it moving. And one of the reasons for that is, lately at any rate, is the rapidity of the pace of change. It's hard to decide what you're going to put into a training package. Like, you know, one of the things we obviously would love to train people on is how to use Gutenberg with a screen reader. But that has hardly been the same model for 3 months straight over the course of the last year and a half. It's been relatively stable now, but there are still some other fairly substantial changes still to come. So there are challenges. It's a big topic. And I think what would be most useful to me, and that you'll have to chime in if you have different thoughts, is knowing what would be most useful to people to learn. Like what is a nice graspable thing, something that can be talked about in a 20 to 30 minute talk at a meetup group. Is it making accessible themes? Is it working with JavaScript and ARIA? Is it React? There's so many different pieces of what makes something accessible that always sounds challenging to me. What do you think?
I agree. And it depends a lot of what you said, like the perspective. Like you want this to be training for those who create content, those who create websites, right? And so it can be really wide.
You're muted. Enrique, you've become muted. Apparently, you are still muted. Oh, well. There we go. Not anymore. Oh, well, you don't say you're muted. Have you come unplugged? Okay, apparently Zoom has voted Enrique off the island. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, hopefully that gets resolved soon.
Yes, indeed. For the moment, I guess we'll move on.
Oh, I was gonna say, I know that the our accessibility team, I haven't looked at it in quite some time. We have a handbook. Would something like that be maybe a good starting point for Peter to look at, or maybe a way he could contribute would be to help flesh out that handbook and add more sections to it?
Yeah, I think that is a great comment. There is a WordPress Accessibility Team handbook, which you can find at make.wordpress.org/accessibility. And somewhere in there, there's a navigation item for handbook. It has a lot of kind of the basics of accessibility and some information about how that works with WordPress. But it could certainly stand to be fleshed out. And anybody who wanted to help contribute to that, write some additional things, update things, it's a challenge. Oh, I've been asked to send a link to the handbook in the comments section. That makes a lot of sense. That's so much more logical than just talking. I'll do that. Let's see.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, great.
Okay.
He's back.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
All right. I mean, not like you could have done anything about it. All right, we've now got a pile of questions. I need to figure out which ones are answered. I think the training one is answered to the best of our ability. It doesn't exist. It should exist. We would love to have somebody come in and help with that. That's your opportunity. So we have a question, which is, when do you think Gutenberg with a screen reader will be stable? I think that's actually going to be very soon. I think we're nearing that point where it's fairly stable now. It's just that there are some changes still to come, some usability things that are being resolved that we haven't quite fully established the best possible solution to. There will always be the potential for some degree of future change. I mean, as we learn more, as we find better ways of doing things, as screen readers change and opportunities change. But I think it's reasonable to say that in the next major release, I would judge it to be pretty stable. Would you agree with that, Enrique?
I would agree. This will also depend on the user, right? How they access Gutenberg, the specific needs that they have. But I agree that it is stable, and again, it's getting better every day.
I mean, there's still a rapid pace of change, but those changes at this point in time are more resolving fine details and polishing things, making experiences better. There's less of the kind of tear this down and build something new in its place, if that is clear. Yeah. And we have, I think this is going to be our last question. We've been going for just about an hour, and that's been great. I appreciate everybody's attendance, and I'm going to just tackle this question, and then we will sign off. Oh, I've got 2 questions. I'll see if I can get to that one. So we have just a note from Peter Ingersoll, which was that one of the most effective things for him initially was to hear someone on a podcast demonstrate how a screen reader works and how bad a poorly coded site can be for accessibility. That is a demo that I've done numerous times. It can be difficult to convey that, just because to the untrained ear, the screen reader experience can seem awful even on a good site. So you have to really be very careful to use examples that clearly demonstrate missing information. So it's a good demonstration. It's a good way to just kind of give people kind of potentially at least a gut punch realization that, wow, if I do this wrong, I'm creating a serious barrier to people. What would you both say?
I was just looking up a link. There's a site called Access Lab, Accessibility, and in November they published an excellent post with just dozens of videos of people accessing technology with assistive technology of all types that I think is really helpful for seeing all the different ways people might be interacting with a website that you've built and the different barriers that they might run into. So I'll share that link in the group chat here.
Great. All right, so the last question we have, and I'm going to go ahead and do this because it is actually about the event. And the question is, would we use for WordPress Accessibility Day some sort of automatic transcription service like Otter, Stream Text, or Web Captioner? And the answer is no. We are going to have live captioning for the entire event. And we have not yet selected a captioning service to do that. And that's going to be a little bit dependent on fundraising. We need to start collecting sponsors to pay for things, because otherwise we have no budget. But we have committed to having fully live captioning for the entire event, because ultimately, the best captions are always going to come from a live, real-time transcription. And I'll take this moment to thank our captioner provided by White Coat Captioning for providing their services for our event today. It's been incredibly valuable. And thank you for being able to do that on what was definitely very short notice. And I think that's it. Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to say? I do have a note from somebody saying they can't see the chat. And I thought it was in the chat. Oh, whoops. That's because both Natalie and I sent our notes to all panelists, which is just myself, Enrique, Natalie, and the captioner. So we'll just do that again. That does make things a little bit more confusing. Thanks for mentioning that. We would have had no idea. All right. I appreciate everybody who came. Thanks so much for your time, Enrique and Natalie and our captioner. That's it. I look forward to seeing you in the future for WordPress Accessibility Day on October 2nd. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.